Is this Miracle Pictures?
Kicking things off for this episode, we have a very short trailer for New World Pictures' Hollywood Boulevard from 1976. This film came about as a bet from John Davison, who was a producer working at New World, who bet Roger Corman that he could make the cheapest movie New World had ever made. And with a budget of $60,000 and only 10 days to complete a film, Davison went away and created this fairly meta story of a low-budget film studio. It uses footage from plenty of other New World Pictures films to fill out its running time. You'll spot moments from The Big Birdcage and Night of the Cobra Woman and Unholy Rollers and Savage, and then it kind of throws in this murder mystery to kind of give it its own backstory, as well as a performance by Commander Cody and the Airmen. It's not a great movie, but it is genuinely funny and kind of a lot of fun. Check it out.
She was alone. They were renegades.
From the height of the exploitation genre, this is 1986's Fair Game, very, very sweaty movie, directed by Mario Andrecchio. A young woman runs a wildlife sanctuary out in the Australian outback and finds herself terrorised by a gang of poachers who have decided that man is the greatest animal to hunt. They ruin her life in all manner of ways before obviously coming a cropper at the hands of her vengeance towards the end of the movie. It kind of dropped off the map as a film until Quentin Tarantino started raving about it, by which point it found its notoriety. Ironically, Andrecchio, when speaking of the movie, says that he meant for it to just be like a piece of shit-nothing film, and he was actually kind of disappointed that people were heralding it as a classic. As many of you will know, one of our favourite kinds of trailers here at DTT are trailers that use footage shot specifically for the trailer, not taken from the film. And this is a really good example with the teaser for 1989's Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, in which we see Voorhees looking over the New York City and preparing to bring his brand of chaos to its people. Unfortunately, as those of you who've seen the film will know, Jason really doesn't spend a lot of time in New York in this film. For budgetary reasons, most of the film actually takes place on like a boat out in some godforsaken river, with a lot of the New York locations actually just being Vancouver, British Columbia. It was the poorest performing of the Friday the 13th movies, despite it being the most expensive to make, and New York itself also didn't see the funny side, with one of the film's posters actually being withdrawn from licensed use of the I Heart New York symbol.
13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Now, New York has a new problem.
Whew, you want to talk about sleazy movies? We're looking at one of the sleaziest here. This is Death Wish 2 from 1982, directed by Michael Winner. It's the sequel, obviously, to his 1974 classic Death Wish. Charles Bronson returns as architect Paul Kersey, who's forced to take up his vigilante ways once again after a gang of thugs break into his Los Angeles home, bringing death and destruction to various acquaintances and family members. This was the first Death Wish film produced by Cannon Film, who had picked up the license from Dino De Laurentiis. Menachem Golan was originally scheduled to direct, but Bronson insisted that Michael Winner return. I'm not quite sure why you'd insist Michael Winner make a film for you, but I guess Bronson was just incredibly comfortable with working with him. It's a really violent movie. It's kind of horrible and immoral and incredibly righteous, but the sexual assault in it is just despicable, really just down and dirty, and basically what Michael Winner seemed to put in a lot of his movies. He was a big fan of that stuff. Vincent Gardenia returns as Detective Ocho, who chased Kersey out of New York in the first movie, and a young Lawrence Fishburne also appears in the movie as one of the gang members. If you ever meet Lawrence, remind him of this role. I'm sure he'll be really grateful. It gets a little crazy towards the end. It's somewhat reserved compared to the absolute chaos that we'd see come in Death Wish 3 and Death Wish 4, where Paul Kersey just essentially becomes the Terminator.
Charles Bronson.
Goodbye.
Death Wish 2. He's doing it for you.
And rounding out this episode, we have 1988's Nightmare Beach, which is also known as Welcome to Spring Break. This is directed by a Harry Kirkpatrick, which is a pseudonym for two people, James Justice, who wrote the film, and Italian horror legend Umberto Lenzi, who was brought on to direct but stepped away from the project and asked for his name to be taken off it. It's the story of a bike gang leader, Diablo, who is executed via electric chair but then seemingly has come back from the dead to wreak revenge on a huge party of people at spring break, including the girl who was responsible for sending him to death row. It's a super character-driven movie. Everyone in the film is like turned up to 11, and it makes it very entertaining. The bike gang are all ridiculous. John Saxon's in there as a corrupt police official. Michael Parks is in there as a guilt-ridden alcoholic doctor. All the adults in the movie are bad guys. It's very much like it's a very much a fuck authority film. But even all the kids themselves are like troublemakers. There's a sex mad co-ed. There's a pickpocket. There's a prankster. There's a hotel owner who has holes in the walls of all of the rooms so he can spy on people. Nobody in the film's normal, and that gives it a really delightful fantasy and good time feeling that sets off the gore. Our heroes are played by Nicholas de Toth, who is now a Hollywood editor, who's worked on films such as Terminator 3, Into the Blue, and most recently Gunpowder Milkshake. And the love interest is Sarah Buxton, who those of a certain age will remember as Annie from the noughties soap opera Sunset Beach. It's kind of flat as a slasher movie, but it's so bright and silly and stupid and colourful, with some really pretty nice gore effects, so it's definitely worth checking out for Italian horror fans or just horror fans in general. And that's going to do it for this first episode of this side project. I don't even have a name for these little compilations yet, but I hope to do more of them. Maybe you can come up with a name. But I really appreciate you listening. Stay tuned for more trailers and other projects. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and do remember to follow us over on Twitter at DT Trailers. So I'll catch you next time, and remember, just watch the best bits.